Before we get to breaking down and listing and dissecting the four types of bootlicks that we got to be on the watch for, there is a little bit of housekeeping that I want to do first. If anyone has any doubts that the white media is fighting a nonstop jihad, a deliberate, concerted, organized effort across all white media platforms to carpet bomb the public with as many images of black men as sexual predators and all the rest of it that you can imagine, that ought to be gone now. There should be no doubt whatsoever. If you're one of the idiots who was saying, I'm not so sure, well, you're not brain dead. You're probably just plain dead. So what's that got us up to? What are we up to now? There was The People versus OJ, the case against Cosby, surviving R. Kelly, and now you've got this whole escaping Neverland thing. This is what the white media is doing. Look how many documentaries there are in the space of only a year or so. This is what they've done in the space of about a year. Just document, so-called documentary after documentary. This is nothing but white media hit pieces where they put together as many of their little talking points as they can and then say, we got some news about these niggers. Meanwhile, we haven't seen any documentaries against Jeffrey Epstein, haven't seen anything about Kevin Spacey. I'm still waiting for the mini-series about freaking Harvey Weinstein. Nothing about Woody Allen. Nothing about Louis C.K., nothing about Bryan Singer. To this day, that documentary, An Open Secret, they still have not been able to put out the information about Bryan Singer that they had because of fear of litigation, obviously. But this is what's going on. Hey, nobody's come up to Corey Feldman and said, hey, you got some accusations to make, Corey. We'll go ahead and bankroll your documentary. Nobody's going up to Corey Feldman and offering to finance his project. The white media, you don't see CNN doing anything like that. Lifetime's not making any documentaries. Nobody's offering Corey Feldman anything. Gee, I wonder why, because he's not accusing any black people. So this is the white media. This is how you know race war's on. White media, the propaganda arm of white supremacy, is pushing it hard as possible. They're putting aside any pretense that there's no racism behind this. As far as they're concerned, go ahead and say it all you want. This is life and death for us. And this is something that needs to be pointed out because you're not seeing the black feminists who are so hot and bothered about the safety of black girls. You're not seeing them pointing out the lies here when, to hear them tell it, they happen to be in the crosshairs. A few days ago, I had some white supremacists who found their way into my Twitter feed. Obviously, they put down the meth and mayonnaise sandwiches long enough to go peck out some nonsense on their keyboards. But some of the mayonnaise monkeys decided that they were going to fling their feces in my Twitter feed, and some of these idiots were going, yeah, you were saying that the killer of Jasmine Barnes was white. Well, it wasn't a white man who killed Jasmine Barnes. Now, even if I was so gullible as to go along with the enforcement arm of white supremacy's initial out-of-hand denial, let's go ahead and give you that one. You can't deny that it was definitely some white men who killed Charlena Lyles, and Ayanna Jones, and Rakia Boyd, and Sandra Bland, and I'll be here till 3 in the morning. So if you want to play that game, we'll play it, and guess what? Black people will still tragically win that one. But you know who ain't going to win it? The black feminists won't, because they're on team white supremacy. And these black LGBTQRSTUV types, they're not going to win an argument like that because as far as they're concerned, they got better things to do. Better things to do than to ensure their survival. And all of these black liberals, you know, like Toure. By the way, Toure, from what I hear, he was apparently in that Surviving R. Kelly propaganda piece, and now Essence Magazine, just a couple of days later, is dragging him, saying, hey, wasn't he accused of some stuff too? See, that's the reason why being a black bootlick, it's a career path that doesn't come with a retirement plan. Yeah, it wasn't even a full day before Toure's pals over in the white media, or rather their black surrogates, were sitting here deciding to drag him. So even when you get out there and sell the soap for him, just like Tiffany Haddish, Toure has found out there is no honor among thieves. Now that's just my little intro there. But for you black folks who want to pretend as if they're going to be running out of steam, all the white media's got to do is just bring up any unfounded nonsense against black men. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not, doesn't matter if it's founded on anything or not. This clown, one of these two clowns, are supposed to be in this upcoming Michael Jackson smear piece, which is getting shown at Sundance, by the way, so Robert Redford, take a bow. But Sundance, which is supposed to be it's supposed to be basically the debut party for up and coming talent in the world of film, and this is what they're choosing to do with their platform, giving a platform to a bunch of liars. One of these guys, he actually was going on talk shows talking about how Michael Jackson didn't do anything to him, and now he's turning around and saying this garbage. So it's not a matter of whether or not the lies are founded on anything at all. It ain't about that. It's a matter of we have got to put out as many stories as possible accusing black men of sexual impropriety. We got to do as many as possible. We need it to be daily, all the time. It has to be 24/7. We got too many white guys who are getting exposed, so now what we need is to push a counter narrative. In fact, we just need a flood of counter narrative. Anything that shows black men being dragged, anything that shows black men being accused. We need black men to be the face of this. Not enough black men are getting accused, so we're going to go ahead and fix that by accusing any of them, or just give a platform to anyone who has an accusation. Doesn't matter, just dredge up something. Kevin Hart, he's gonna be getting a job hosting the Oscars. Well, wasn't there something about Kevin Hart making jokes about gays? Louis C.K., that faded from the headlines pretty fast, wasn't it? He told the victims of a mass shooting to F off. And yet, for some strange reason, the white media decided, well, that story doesn't have legs, buddy. Meanwhile, if the white media ran out of stuff to say about Kevin Hart, so it became, well, anyone who criticizes Kevin Hart, in comes Don Lemon. Yeah, they'll go. It's no longer a matter of trashing Kevin Hart. It's a matter of, well, we'll report on anyone who is trashing Kevin Hart. And all of you folks who were just so happy to see a black woman as the state's attorney up in Cook County, here she is deciding, well, I gotta find a way to get on the white media bandwagon. My white masters in the Democratic Party are saying, hey, you gotta help us out, Kim Foxx. You gotta go after R. Kelly. You gotta help to perpetuate this. You gotta help to go ahead and give this legs. Yeah, you got the white media saying, man, if Bill Cosby, that was an easy one, easier than we thought, so we can just take down any old black man with accusations now. That's what the white media is counting on. They're making no bones about it now. This is a full court press. They're just coming out, putting aside any pretense that this ain't racial. They don't care if you point that out. As far as they're concerned, this is war. They'll go ahead and take a couple of hits if it helps them to push their overall agenda. And now that done, now that we've gone ahead and pointed out that this full-scale assault by the white media against black men, that this happens to be part of their agenda, this is part of an ongoing campaign that the white media is waging across the board, across all venues. They're sitting here pushing this. Now that we've gotten that across, let's go ahead and talk about the people who have been helping the white media to do this. Let's go ahead and expose and dissect at least 4 of the types of black bootlicks that white supremacy relies upon. Now, because of the fact that these clowns all have a common dysfunction, they're coming from a place of common insecurity and inferiority complexes and all the rest of it, you're going to find significant overlap between them, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to break them into categories anyway. Now, if you look at the black feminist and the black LGBT types and the black conservative liberals, blacks who consider themselves to be either conservatives or liberals, and black swirlers / intersectionalists, what do they all have in common? They each have found something about white culture or about the white community that they've become obsessed with, and they use this as their rationale for attacking black people full time. That's what the black feminists and the black LGBTQ types and all the rest of them, that's what these 4 groups have in common. They attack black people full time. Black feminists idolize white women. To them, the idea of being a white woman is more important to them than black people, particularly black men, so they've decided to obsess over that. Black LGBTQs, whatever, feel that their white sexual practices are more important than black people, so they obsess over that. Now, you see, Professor Truth, I'm a black heterosexual, but I almost never mention that because I don't define myself by what I do in the bedroom. I'm black first. Black conservatives and liberals, they think that white people's ideas and white ideals are much more important than anything black people have to say. Being around white people makes them feel smart, so they just repeat whatever they hear some white person say, because if a white person says it, then it must be true. And even if it's not true, at the very least, it must be learned and scholarly, right? And finally, the black swirlers. swirlers. Now, with the swirlers, you get a lot of overlap with the previous three groups. With the swirlers slash intersectionalists, these guys, they seem to run the gamut. Among the swirlers, you find all sorts of self-professed black feminists and black LGBTQs and people who tell you that they're biracial and, they when you ask them what ethnicity are you, they say everything first except for black. They're Swedish, they're Dutch, they're Filipino, they're Martian, but, black comes dead last. So black folks tend to think that if you've covered black feminists and the black LGBTs, then you've also covered swirlers too. And it is somewhat redundant, perhaps, but since currying white favor is at the heart of all bootlicks, it does bear repeating regardless. Now, the thing that people need to understand, and black men in particular need to internalize, is why the black feminist turned traitor. Do they hate black men? Of course they do, but that's not the entirety of why they're so bitter. That's not why they're constantly attacking black men and ignoring the white racists who are actually hurting black women as a group. Black men give the black feminist a focus for their hatred. What they really hate is black people. Their constant black male bashing, that's just their way of trying to prove to white mommy and daddy that they want to be just like them, specifically like white mommy. When they attack black men, it's not because they want black men to care. Black men are irrelevant in their minds. The audience who the black feminist is trying to reach is a white audience. This rarely gets any significant white attention, so to an extent the black feminists do want black men to at least pay them some manner of attention, but that's merely to help them not feel as if they totally don't exist, because the black feminist gets her sense of self from other people, particularly white people, so it's only when someone pays them attention, whether positive or negative is unimportant, that they don't feel like the walking dead. Attacking black men is the only time the black feminists feel like they've got something resembling power. They don't have the ability to influence anything or anyone else, so it's a matter of we're going to attack black men because we know that the white power structure will back us up on that. Okay, yeah, we had to go sucking up to white daddy to make something happen, but at least we were able to get something to happen even if we had to beg someone else to do it. That's how pathetic the black feminists are. They cannot influence or change or have anything to do with anything in their lives. So it's a matter of if I have no control over my life, maybe I can find a way to exert some control and power over someone else's life. Hey, white daddy, that black man over there, we'll help you trash him. We'll go ahead and pave the way for you and attack black men. Ah, you black men, you need to bow to us. That's what the black feminists are on, this kind of crap that they're about. They want a white man to see them doing white power's dirty work and think that they have the same value system, so hopefully she can audition to be a bedwench, or they want a white woman to see it and think that they have the same value system, and hopefully they can audition to be a white woman's black friend, or bedwench if the white woman is so inclined. As the black feminists saw it, and still see it today, when they turned their backs on black men 60 years ago, what they thought they were doing was escaping blackness. That's how the black feminists saw it. It was not all that claptrap and garbage about, these black men were oppressing us, mouthing these white women's talking points. That was just a way for them to rationalize what was an act of blatant treason. The real motivation happened to be that they were trying to get as far away from black as possible. And when you turn your back on fully 50% of the black population, well, of course you're going to feel like, finally, I'm getting away from those niggers over there. That's at the root of the black feminist mindset. The black feminist is only one Confederate flag away from being a dyed-in-the-wool white supremacist. And for a lot of them, if you look at the ghetto gaggers and all this other self-hate on parade, a lot of them just said, let's go full retard and be complete white supremacists. They picked up the Confederate flag and here we go. The pathetic attacks that they do against black men, that's just them proclaiming to white power that they're on team white supremacy. The same way some chump in the NFL decides to surround himself with as many white women as possible and making it where their social circle is nothing but white people, it's just a variation on the same theme. These people think that they're escaping blackness. But the modern-day black feminists, after 60 years of white governmental and corporate handouts, and after seeing the collapse of the black matriarchy, the black feminists have now gone farther than their mothers and grandmothers ever did into their absurd delusion. Not only are they still repeating the same brain-dead talking points of the white women they idolize, but they're telling us that they have nothing to apologize for. Now, this is the danger of deciding that you're going to follow behind white social movements, because we don't live in a vacuum, folks. We live in a society that is stratified, and the stratification of this society is based on race. What it is that these white women over here doing, that ain't going to work for you. That's not something that's in your interest. That white woman's pursuing what's in her interest. She ain't thinking about you. And here you are thinking I can go ahead and do the same thing that they're doing and get the same results when you don't even understand what they're doing. And truth be told, these white feminists, they didn't go off the deep end with this stuff. They talk a good game about feminism all day, but when it comes down to it, when it's time to get serious, they put the feminism chatter aside. Look at the election of Donald Trump if you don't believe it. It was a majority of white women who helped put him over the top into the White House. A majority of white women voted for Donald Trump, even though most of his sexual harassment and assault victims were white women. They looked and said, well, this is about our power, though. So we ain't going to worry about that handful of white women who Donald Trump did wrong. We're concerned about our power. Those white women got on code. They weren't playing any games. Now consider that in contrast to what you see a lot of these black feminists doing with the whole R. Kelly controversy. See, the danger and the deadly delusion of following after white social movements, using feminism as a case study. When the feminists came along, what was their talking point? What's the feminist talking point been for the longest time? That, oh, we're going to free you from the patriarchy. Well, you must mean white male control, because there is no black patriarchy. In order to have a patriarchy, you require power. Safe to say, black men ain't had that for a few hundred years now. So all you black feminists out there, you're bogus. But the white feminists came along with the promise of, well, what have these men, white men, been doing for the longest time? The only thing that they've been doing is reducing you to being nothing but a womb with feet. As far as they're concerned, you're only good for sex and having babies, and that's the whole of your existence. Your existence is nothing more than carrying his child, and nothing more than servicing his pleasure in the bedroom or wherever else he decides to get freaky. Isn't that what the white feminists said? That it was all about this patriarchal control, and that women were reduced to nothing more than a hole between their legs for the use of a man's pleasure, or to hold his child, or to deliver his child. So what did the feminists do? They came along with the idea of free love and abortion, which happened to be the two cornerstones of the feminist movement, at least in a rhetorical sense. And that's all the feminists have delivered. They haven't delivered a damn thing else other than that. And what do abortion and free love, women basically being able to be as sexually libertine as they want, what do those two things have in common? That as women, your freedom revolves around your crotch for the sake of your personal pleasure, or for the sake of aborting your child, for the sake of killing your own child. So the feminists told you that they were going to set you free from your existence revolving solely around sex and delivering babies, and their answer was, sex is your freedom, and making sure you don't deliver babies, that's going to be your power. You see what happened? You ran into the exact same trap headlong. But as Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, black people are forever joining things without examining what it is that they're joining. And that definitely goes triple for the black feminists. They didn't give a damn if it killed them or not. All they cared about was they're going to finally be able to walk hand in hand with Gloria Steinem, or whoever the red-hot bra burner is afterwards. And this is where black women who don't consider themselves feminists need to be careful. A majority of black women took the same wrong turn as the feminists did 60 years ago. We got to be honest about that. The whorehouse culture, it largely was able to graft itself onto the black female community. And we can tell when we look at the STD and the outer wedlock birth rates. More black women than are willing to admit it are black feminists in all but name. That means when I'm talking about black feminists and the havoc that they've wreaked on the black community and how they carry water for white supremacy, odds are fair to middling that I could well be talking about you. In order to avoid having to own up to the damage that they've done, a lot of black women retreated to and hid behind the talking points that the black feminists used. Not because they thought it made sense, but because it gave them something to say whenever somebody was about to make them take responsibility for the damage that was done. When it was time for someone to point the finger at them for the mistakes they made, here come the black feminist talking points. And that's where the devil's bargain with white supremacy becomes particularly odious, because you're trying to defend indefensible behavior and using talking points that were literally handed to you by white supremacy. Those white feminists, you need to go back and look at what those white suffragettes were holding up for their banners back in the early 20th century. One indomitable womanhood, one indomitable race. That was one of the slogans of the suffragettes. And you think to yourself that somehow you got something in common with Susan B. Anthony? Well, you probably do. She was a white supremacist. So if you think that these feminists and these suffragists were all cool, well, in that case, then chances are you're on team white supremacy. And black men can point out the black feminists all day long, but until black women as a group admit to the mistake they made when they signed on to the devil's bargain, the cult of crotch power, then we will never be able to get rid of the black feminists. When black women reject the black feminists, then the black feminists will have nowhere to hide. They'll be just like the swirlers, pretending to be Beckys or lesbians, looking for some community willing to take them in because the black community has cast them out. This is why they try to convince black women that black men are responsible for all their mistakes, that black men are just the devil incarnate, the black men are to blame for every bad thing that's ever happened to you. Get the black women angry and keep them angry. That way, they never focus on the black feminists, and the black feminists never have to worry about being exiled. That's what's going on. See, that's the danger of linking arms with these black feminists. That's the danger of repeating any of their talking points. You got to cast them out and keep them out. Now next, we're going to go ahead and deal with the black LGBTs. First of all, whatever you choose to do in the bedroom, so long as it's between two consenting, non-related adults, I can't really get a full head of steam about it, but the problem is it's not staying in the bedroom. What was previously confined to bathhouses and the basement dungeons of sex parlors has now apparently become a social movement. So the kind of sex dungeon subculture that was going on in New York and Los Angeles and California, now apparently it's going to be a social movement. This is going to be the new normal. The kind of kink by its very definition is abnormal, but apparently not anymore. So the question becomes, if kink, which is where this stuff is coming from, if this stuff is going to become the new normal, then my God, what are they going to have to do in order to feel as if they're breaking taboos? Because that's what it's about. What's that old saying? Sex is not what happens between your legs, it's what happens between your ears. And the thing about sexual adventurism is that people start off by deciding that they're going to have sex without condoms, and before it's all over, they're trying to have sex with a chainsaw at 30,000 feet. It takes more and more for them to feel as if somehow they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, or the risk factor somehow tantalizes them. They got to go over the top with it. Now, I'm not trying to compare homosexuality with having sex with a freaking chainsaw, but what I am saying is, at the end of the day, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that a society is going to be able to adopt and integrate a practice which by its very definition cannot give rise to the next generation. And if you tell me that you're going to be living strictly in terms of surrogate mothers or surrogate fathers, then what you're also saying is that the relationships between human beings have no meaning to you. You cannot have an entire society in which you got a bunch of children who don't know who their fathers are, don't know who their mothers are, and all that matters is you got 2 men or 2 women playing house. You can go ahead and do it, but your society is teaching the value that human relationships don't really have that much worth. And when you start down that road, your society doesn't last very long. Now, what does this have to do with the black community? Why is it that we seem to have a whole bunch of black LGBTs who, for some strange reason, feel the need to go in on the black community? Don Lemon, he didn't even wait to find out whether or not he could get an interview with Kevin Hart, he decided, well, let me go ahead and show the white powers that be that if no other black people are willing to go in on Kevin Hart, I'll do it. There's a symptom of the problem. Why is there so much antipathy from the black gay community against the black community at large? It's because homosexuality is not an accepted practice among black people, especially, particularly among black men. Black men in particular have been the most stalwart in not accepting the gay lifestyle. It's no coincidence that as the numbers of openly gay people began to rise in the black church, the numbers of black men began to fall. That's not a coincidence. It's a fact that black people living the gay lifestyle see that it's simply not embraced in the black community and that the strongest opposition comes from black men. This is why you see the white media viciously attacking any black man who doesn't endorse the gay lifestyle. What have I always told you? That white supremacy is a continual, non-stop, daily breaking process, and that the breaking process takes place every single day, not just one time, but every day you have to be broken all over again. Every day they must force you to submit to white supremacy, or as Brother Khalid Muhammad put it, they got to force you to bend over and give evil an opening. This constant attacking of black men who don't accept the gay lifestyle, like holding Kevin Hart up as a proxy for black men, the purpose behind it is to show we're going to crucify you in the media and try to declare you some sort of persona non grata. We're going to try to make you anathema to the society more than you already are. I don't see how that's possible. But we're going to just daily have fun lynching you in the media if you refuse to endorse the gay lifestyle. Not only that, but you have to participate in some gay acts yourself. You need to kiss a man. You need to grab a man's crotch. You need to do something to show that, see, I'm willing to do this. This is about breaking black men down and forcing them to submit to something that they refuse to accept. Well, no matter how much cross-dressing Negroes they put in their movies or on TV shows, gay will never be the new black. So this is why the Don Lemons will attack Kevin Hart for a joke that he already apologized for, which wasn't even offensive. But Don Lemon won't say a word about the white supremacist gays like Milo Snuffleupagus. Don Lemon ain't got nothing to say about that. Don Lemon isn't telling Milo to apologize for anything that he's done. He's not demanding that all of these racist gays and LGBT types be held to account. Don Lemon's not talking about the racism in the gay community. He's not calling anybody out. He's not saying that, well, whatever you've said isn't good enough. Have you ever heard Don Lemon do that mess? Have you ever heard him do that? Where some white person was accused of saying something racist, the white person gave some non-apology, and Don Lemon immediately said, well, that's not good enough. If he did, you definitely didn't see the white media giving it wall-to-wall coverage. So he understands if Don Lemon wants to remain relevant, which means useful to white power, then he's got to make sure that they understand, yes, I will frequently go in on black people. I'll be the Negro who always attacks black people so that white power doesn't have to. When you put a bedroom practice before your own survival, then you're already doomed. Don Lemon may live his life behind first, but the rest of us aren't. And you can't understate how duplicitous black people practicing this are, because no matter how many dead black bodies are in the streets, whenever we get together to focus black people on fighting back, you can always count on some black LGBTQ to be the first one attacking the black community and telling us what gay issues are more important. Every time some black people get together to try to put an agenda on the table, on cue, there's going to be some black member of the LGBTQs deciding that, well, what about the black community's hostility toward gays? What do you mean? We ain't killing anybody, not lynching anybody. Yeah, but you're not embracing, and you why don't you try it? You can't knock it till you try it. And all of a sudden, here they come out, just hard as hell against black people, but only when they see us trying to organize. The rest of the time, they don't say anything. So if black people want to get together for some tomfoolery, the black LGBTs, they ain't got a problem with that. They won't be objecting. Doesn't matter what the hell you're doing. You can be out there being sexist as you want. The LGBTs ain't got a problem with that. Nobody's going to say, well, what about the gays? But the second you say we're going to start getting serious, it's time to put some agendas on the table, then all of a sudden, no you don't. Look, the gays already have the right to marry. What the hell else do they want at this point? Well, gay marriage was never the point. What they want, what they do not have, and what they are terrified that they're never going to get is for non-gay people to validate what they do in the bedroom. And that validation doesn't come in the form of, hey, whatever you do is up to you. That ain't the validation that they're looking for. There's a lot of black people desperate for interracial sex, and this is why so many of them are always attending political rallies. They're looking for some white person to hook up with. Say, you're not racist, little white woman, are you? Well, if you're not, have you ever had sex with a black man? This is what so many in the gay community have done. The definition of homophobe is if you refuse to drop trow and bend over. If you don't have gay sex, then you're a homophobe. That's what it means. When they come up to you, they're not coming up to you for the sake of finding out if you're hostile to them. They're coming up to you for the sake of, now we're going to get you to do this whether you want to or not. There has always, since ancient times, there has always been a core element of coercion and force behind homosexuality. Let's just come straight up the middle. Homosexuality has always been about coercion. Every time you look up, you see some gay person who previously was waving the flag and saying, hey, nothing wrong with me. And then whenever they get caught doing something wrong, like Milo did, like Kevin Spacey and others have done, like Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry and Lee Daniels, and I'll be here till 5 in the morning, every time some gay person gets caught up in a scandal, when they're trying to get sympathy, what's the first thing that they run to? When I was a child, I was sexually abused. Milo sits there and he finds himself in a pedophile scandal, and the first thing that he does, a pedophile advocacy scandal, and he immediately retreats to, well, I was assaulted by a pedophile, and it just went on, and nobody helped me. And all. Wow. Now, this is not to say that all gay people are pedophiles, but it is to say that there are pedophiles among the gays. And that being the case, unfortunately, when people have been violated, one of the first things that a lot of them do is they try to reclaim that lost power by acting out that exact same scenario. They try to take power from someone else in the exact same manner that it was taken from them. And this happens to be one of the things that goes along with homosexuality. Now, I'm not going to say that every homosexual is the result of child molestation or child rape. There are some people out there who, a very small handful, who actually are just, well, they're bent in that direction. They ain't straight, they're bent. Usually over. But that said, sorry, but if you look at the last few years alone, if you look at the number of people, especially young people, who are saying that they're homosexual, those numbers have gone up, and that can't be the case. That cannot possibly be the result of, oh, well, I just discovered that I was gay. No, this is socialization happening here. This happens to be somebody who has retreated into themselves. Perhaps they're awkward around those of the opposite sex. And what's happening is they're trying to find some sort of comfort in saying, well, this is what I must belong to. There's a whole lot of dysfunction that's been on display that never gets dealt with. A whole lot of undiagnosed dysfunction. And this is what has found its way into the black community. We've created safe spaces for people who do not identify themselves as being black. They identify themselves by a bedroom activity. When a couple of lesbians try to seriously claim that they wanted a pizzeria of all things to cater their gay wedding, then you realize their mission is to weaponize every aspect of the society, particularly the law, for the sake of forcing people to behave how they want them to. What's that old saying? Everything is about sex except for sex. Sex is about power. And nowhere is that axiom more apt than as it pertains to the gay political agenda. This is about exercising power over other people. How many gays have admitted that they were molested and raped as children and then turned around and said, you know what, I'm going to become the biggest anti-pedophile activist out there? They don't. You would think that something like that nature would make it where they would be just these anti-pedophile zealots, but that almost never happens. You talk to them without much prodding, they practically all have the same story. So why the world is it that they're on this jihad? It's because they define themselves in terms of a bedroom activity. But the problem with that happens to be they don't have that many people to practice it with. The gay population is tiny. No matter what demographic delusions and no matter what kind of statistician pretzeling that they try to do, no matter what kind of demographic pretzeling they engage in, they can't change the numbers. So when you have a tiny number of people whose entire identity is wrapped up in their bedroom activity, but they don't have many people to practice this lifestyle with, you immediately run into a problem. Not merely a sexual problem, but a social problem. The gay agenda is to expand their pool of sexual partners as much as they can. That's what all the legislative coercion and social browbeating of heterosexuals is all about. That's why they're constantly doing it, why they're not going to stop. Black LGBTs are also trying to escape being black. They hope that by touting their gay lifestyle that this is going to make white supremacy treat them differently. Black lesbians are usually the most militant anti-black male haters out there. They're black and lesbians. As they see it, they figure they got twice as much a chance of escaping being black. I'll talk about the fact that I'm a woman. I'll talk about my being a lesbian. I'm a woman and a lesbian, so I got twice as much chance of being able to put blackness behind me. They actually think that that kind of checking off of boxes somehow means something. And black gay men, they hope that being gay is going to make them seen as less of a threat. They see how black male heterosexuals are treated as public enemy number one. Everyone knows a black man who is unabashedly a man, he's seen as a threat. He's got a bullseye on his back, on his forehead, on his chest, and everywhere else. So these black gay men try to put on the airs of a woman. And this is why gay black men make such a show of being flamboyantly gay. There's very few black males who are homosexual who actually try to hide it, because the truth of the matter is they want people to know that they're homosexual, that they're practicing that. That's the whole point. As far as they're concerned, the fact that they're putting their gayness on flamboyant display, that's supposed to be their shield that protects them. See, I'm not a threat. Look at how I'm acting. I'm not a threat. I'm not a threat. I'm not a threat. They're begging for mercy is essentially what they're doing, on their hands and knees. They go over the top with it, because to them this is a shield that they're hoping is going to ward off any sort of attacks. Well, it don't work. No matter how many white men they let run through them, they always wind up alone and ostracized in the end. The story always ends the same pathetic way. And for the black lesbians, it's even worse. They usually wind up trying to go back to being heterosexuals, which leads nowhere. This is part of the reason why we have got to be very careful with all of this nonsense. Yes, we do not intend to become just some group of frightened exclusivists, but the problem happens to be that you cannot just decide that every idea has a place in the black community. You can't do that. Because what you wind up with is you wind up with one gigantic asylum. Now, next we're going to be talking about the black conservative liberals. Any sort of black person who touts, I'm a conservative, or a black person who touts, I'm a black liberal, or I'm a black left-winger, or I'm a black right-winger. All of these things have to do with white supremacy. White supremacy created conservatism and liberalism. White supremacy created right-wing and left-wing. Under white supremacy, that's all you got. You got left-wing white supremacy and right-wing white supremacy. What's the difference? One is not as rude to your face as the other one is. That's the only difference. So if you're some black person out there who apparently thinks that you're going to graft yourself onto the white left-wing, right-wing movements, you're a damn fool. You're just a meat puppet repeating whatever this or that white intellectual, quote-unquote, has to say. And most of the talking points come from white think tanks, and I think by now, hopefully, some black people are realizing that these white think tanks are nothing more than organizations of white ideologues getting together trying to figure out how they can come up with catchphrases and all sorts of frauds in order to mislead the society in the direction the white supremacy wants it to go. So you black conservative liberals out there, black conservative / liberals, you guys just repeat what you hear the white powers that be say without actually thinking about what they're saying and whether or not it makes any real sense. What I'm talking about in this case are the black people who you see spouting white ideological talking points and who think of themselves as being academics as a result of this. This goes for black people who have bought into either the white right-wing, left-wing line of rhetoric as well, like our pal Toure, and like Henry Skip the Gates Truth, and like Cornel West and others, and Joy Reid, and Jamila LaPuke, and all the rest of these clowns. The black person on the street usually repeats white left-wing, right-wing orthodoxy because they heard or saw some black person, usually a black person with the title of professor or doctor, like Mark Lamont Hill. They saw some black person on television talking this claptrap, and the black person on the street goes, well, there must be a place for me over there with those good white folks and their good white ideology because there's this black person saying it, so it must be they must be accepting of me to some degree or another. And that's how a lot of black folks on the street get caught up in this nonsense, because they see some black person on television and they're so simple that they think to themselves, well, there must be something basically true about it. Well, this must have something to do with me. Well, I saw it on television, so that means it must be true. Black so-called conservatives, they only have about one black right-wing academic who they can ever point to, usually Thomas Sowell. White right-wingers have no respect for Thomas Sowell at all. White think tanks never ever cite or rely on his research, if he has any, and they look at him only when it comes time to talk about black folks. They never look at him when it comes time to formulate policy. You go ahead and look at those white papers and position papers that these white think tanks come out with, or these white political parties, and they never ever mention Thomas Sowell at all. They never mention him for anything. He only gets trotted out whenever white media or some white political or social organization needs some simple-minded black person who's going to say that racism isn't white people's fault, has nothing to do with white people, and black people are to blame. So Thomas Sowell is the gateway drug to white right-wing racism for a number of black people. And these black people who are too intellectually lazy to understand that just because white liberal ideology is against our interests doesn't automatically mean that white conservatism is. They both come from the exact same source, white supremacy. So if you're trying to figure out how to get black folks back in the driver's seat, sorry, but you're not going to find it with the Republican Party or conservative ideology. The differences between them are practically none. The similarities far outweigh the differences between white left-wingers and white right-wingers. That's just a fact. And the world is not a binary equation. If you're sitting here thinking to yourself that the only choices you have in the world are the ones the white power presented to you, you've just told me a lot about yourself. What you've told me is you're not merely intellectually lazy, you're intellectually bankrupt. You're useless to anyone. Instead of looking for some pre-canned solutions brought to you by the same folks who created your problems in the first place, what you need to be doing is creating and formulating solutions of your own. Instead of sitting here looking for talking points that come from white mouthpieces, why don't you go ahead and do some thinking for yourself? And then what comes out of your mouth is not going to be the same old pap that you got from some white supremacist ideologue. And for the record, we don't need to cite who the black liberals look to for ideas, because all of their academic heroes are white, and they feel okay about that because these good white academics give lip service to the reality of racism, right? That's like putting someone on a pedestal just because they said the sky is blue. Of course racism exists, and of course white power is to blame for it. It's stupid to say otherwise. Hell, even Richard Spencer said that. That's the thing about these wannabe black intellectuals. They never learn to think. Following white people is a substitute for having a brain as they see it. Now that may work for white people because we're under a system that gives white people economic and social rewards guaranteed merely for existing. White skin is indeed a substitute for them in the terms of thought. They can use their white skin as a substitute for practically everything. It's a substitute for having to think. It's a substitute for having to work. It's a substitute for having to be right, and that's not going to work for black people. Whiteness is going to be a shield that wards off all responsibility, but it's also going to be a giant grab bag that they can fill with all the guarantees that white supremacy is handing to them. That will work for white people, but it ain't going to work for black folks. And black liberals will never understand that. Since the black conservatives slash liberals are so fond of white quotes, let me give them one from Winston Churchill. Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And when you point out how the black conservatives or black liberals' talking points are wrong, they're never able to explain how they're right. They just go into empty denials and say, well, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you. I don't agree. How many times have we seen that? Whenever the new voices of black media take on these black sock puppets for white power, whenever these clowns get cornered, which usually doesn't take very long, they're almost immediately reduced to saying, well, I don't agree with what you're saying. I don't agree with that. Well, I don't agree. I don't agree. Like a broken record. And you want to know why they sit there and do that pathetic broken record of I don't agree. I don't agree. It's because they've seen the white people who they want to emulate do that whenever they're cornered on a subject. And these clowns think to themselves, well, I'm brilliantly dodging the issue, or I'm brilliantly throwing up a smoke screen, and I'm not going to let myself be cornered, and I'm still going to have my credibility when it's over. Fool, empty denials of reality may work for white people because they control the society. So they don't have to pay a price whenever they're proven wrong. They are given a pass. That works for them, but it ain't going to work for you. A white person spouts some nonsense that doesn't accrue to white academics as a whole, and in most cases, it doesn't even accrue to the white academic himself as an individual. So a white person can sit there and be dead wrong, and not only does that not reduce the standing, esteem, or the reputation of white academics in total, even the white guy who's been proven wrong, he doesn't have to have any loss of face or stature. For God's sake, Bill Bennett is still looked at as being some sort of smart guy, but for what, I don't know. But where a black person is concerned, everything you say and do accrues to black people as a whole, so long as it's negative. White conservatives love to invoke Ben Carson's name, but have you noticed that not one of them believes that all or even most black medical practitioners are as good as white ones? See, they only mention Ben Carson as a way to say, well, see, I can say something pleasant about a black person. Yeah, but the thing is, you ain't recommending no black doctors, now are you? And the black liberals, that black liberal doesn't believe that black ideology is worth anything. The only black thinkers that the black liberal is acquainted with are the ones that white power approves of. You know, part of a reading list. But you'll notice that Dr. John Henrik Clarke never makes the cut. Dr. Ben Yakinen never makes the cut. How many of these black liberals are able to actually tell you anything about Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's race theory, huh? How many of them can tell you anything? Yeah, a couple of them might have cracked open the ISIS papers, but you better believe they closed that thing and put it down, because as far as they were concerned, it was more important that they be reading Gloria Steinem or Naomi Wolf or Andrea Dworkin. That they will read. Anything else, well, we can't read too much because we might offend our good white pals. We don't want them thinking that we don't like white folks. Read, we don't like white power. We don't like being under white subjugation. None of these black liberals ever quotes our grandmaster teachers, at least not in front of white people. Oh, they'll go ahead and give you a couple of quotes, a couple of pre-canned, memorized quotes that they got whenever they're in front of black folks, every blue moon. But they only do that in front of you. They don't do that in front of white folks, and that tells you everything you need to know. They don't quote our grandmaster teachers, but they will liberally quote people like Jeffrey Sachs, an economic expert whose ideas have failed everywhere they've ever been tried. And the reason that the black liberal has no shame about this is because it's not about being right. It's about being white. The idea of intellectual accuracy or factual accuracy, that's a word game that they play with you. The reality is, are you propping up, perpetuating, and helping to push white control? If you are, making sure that white is seen as being the tip top, that white is seen as being smarter, faster, better than everyone else, as long as you're doing that, you're good. You ain't got to be right. Never mind that white intellectuals have given the world more bad ideas and more wrong ideas than anyone else. Being around white people makes the black conservatives and black liberals feel smart, so they just repeat whatever they hear some white person say, because if a white person says it, then it must be true. These mental midgets never question white orthodoxy on any point. They aspire to be white intellectuals. But that's not their real motivation. Colleges and universities are among the most anti-black, ethnically cleansed places on the planet. And that's the reason why these black intellectuals are so hot and bothered to work in the field of academics. It's their favorite place to live and work. So they can be as far away from the Negroes as possible. They can have as little contact with black people as possible. How many of these black studies professors have majority white classrooms? These guys have never contributed anything to black people. Black conservatives and black liberals have never contributed a damn thing to us, and they don't want to. So they have no problem at all trying to shoot down black people's homegrown solutions and ideas, because after all, if black people knew anything, why, they'd be as well informed as the black conservatives and black liberals. Conservatism and liberalism are merely two sides of the same white supremacist ideological spectrum. They both hate black people and they want us eliminated. And the black conservatives, black liberals, they have internalized this same anti-black hostility. They'll gladly co-sign any anti-black rhetoric, or at best give only lukewarm opposition to it, but even then, they're always sure to say that whoever is attacking us has a point. I don't give a dang if it's Thomas Sowell or Juan Williams, or if it happens to be your pal, Lamont, you big dummy Hill, Mark Lamont Hill. When it comes time to debate these white supremacists, they give only lukewarm opposition. And at some point, in fact, a few points along the way, they're going to basically accede that the white supremacist has a point. And speaking of people who never get bashful about saying that white supremacy is right about every negative, evil, sick thing, wrong thing that it says about black people, that brings us to the swirlers, who in many cases like to consider themselves to be intersectionalist, which to me is a nice way of saying that they're all screwed up. These are the poster children for black self-loathing, and they wear their self-hate like a badge of honor. As the swirler sees it, they've transcended blackness because they found a white person to snuggle up with. These clowns are equal parts pathetic and ridiculous, and to us they are 100% dangerous. These guys do not merely come in as willing to co-sign, they are eager to co-sign the most racist crap a white supremacist does, even the murder of black people, because being racially validated means more to them than life. At least it means more to them than the lives of other black people. This is how the swirlers prove their worthiness to have a white sexual partner. Well, I understand that part of the bargain I gotta make is when they go in on black people, I gotta say they're not really racist, no matter how racist their behavior clearly is. Well, they're not really racist. You just don't understand. And then what happens is, sooner or later, eventually, the Thanksgiving dinner from hell comes along. Oh, and he lets his parents call me nigger, and he's calling me nigger too. And we got these idiots who always end up the same way, whining and boo-hooing and trying to get some quickie sympathy by saying, I can't believe that I just couldn't take it anymore, the racism and such, like they were so surprised. The swirlers are so desperate for interracial sexual access that the people who call themselves swirlers are usually female, become a walking attack ad against black people, usually black men. They put on the airs of a white woman, at least what they think to be an ostentatiously white woman. And that the thing about these swirling black females, when you see them, they're sitting here always acting like some sort of white stereotype. All sorts of cutesy nonsense, bobbing their shoulders and smiling like a schoolgirl and puckering up for the camera and using words that just this kind of Susie Homemaker-esque talk, or this faux Valley Girl patois that they put on. And they're doing it for the camera, for no reason. As far as they're concerned, I'm going to sell you on the idea that I'm white, because that's what it's about. You're sitting here talking and acting in ways that you never do under any other circumstances, and what a surprise when their white bedmate finally gives them the boot. They put all that garbage aside. I mean, when you saw the Queen Swirler herself, boo-hooing and such, she wasn't sounding like a fake Becky anymore. She wasn't sounding like a Valley Girl anymore, was she? And same goes for the rest of them. So what does that tell you? They think that every little white female mannerism, usually what they've seen on television, is somehow convincing white people that they're white when the only thing it's convincing white people of is that you need therapy. These swirlers try to make a show of how white they think they are, or at least how white they think they can present themselves as being. And their interests, such as they are, in white-oriented media, they fixate on telling people that they go to places like Hot Topic, or every time you look up they're doing some sort of Japanese cartoon anime thing, or what have you. They're trying to show what sci-fi shows, you always ones with white leads, of course, that they're so into. They obsess over Starbucks, etc. If white women are interested in Fiji, then these swirlers will try to tell people that they're learning how to speak Fijian. If white women have a pair of Manolo Blahnik shoes, then the swirler will go and buy 10 pair. Make sure that they're the most expensive types of Manolo Blahnik shoes, and then these swirlers will do a 45-minute video on YouTube or Instagram showing everyone how much money they wasted. They'll make sure to post up all their stuff. They want everyone to see all of their Becky props. All of these props that they use as they do their I'm a Becky show. That's what it is. All the stuff that they buy, whether it happens to be this or that television series DVD, or this or that shirt, or this or that handbag, or this or that pair of shoes, or whatever. These are all their props that they use as they perform for the cameras. Look, white power, I'm on your side. Whatever it is that they see white women taking an interest in, they go overboard in trying to show that they're even more interested in it. If white women are interested in something, then I'm utterly obsessed with it. I'm consumed with it. The swirler is just like her black gay counterpart. This is exactly what you see black men who are gay doing. She's acting ostentatiously white as her means of showing that she's no threat to white power. She's trying to present herself as not being a threat. Don't attack me, white supremacy. Don't you see that I've colored my hair weave green? Don't you see that I'm trying to look as much like an anime character as possible? Don't you see that I've got every freaking season of Sex in the City? Haven't you seen the handbag? It's exactly like the one that Sarah Jessica Parker had. Haven't you seen the shoes? It's exactly like the kind that Juliana Margulies had on her show. That's what they're doing. This is exactly what they're doing. The same pattern playing itself out all over again. This is what black bootlicks have always done. It's always been this way. It didn't just start with the black gays or the black swirlers in the last few years. In the 19th and into the 20th centuries, you always had the smiling, always happy Mr. Bojangles clown. You see black people sitting there putting on a show for the sake of trying to keep white people pleased with them and show that they're not a threat. All of that unnecessary, over-the-top smiling, making a show out of it. I'm always smiling. Yes, sir. Oh, how you doing, Mr. Charlies? How you doing, Mr. Charlies? Now, you never say hi to anybody else, but as soon as the white folks come in the room, how y'all doing? So all of that garbage, all of that hail fellow, well met, smiling, scratching, shuffling, and the like, that was the old Negro's way of trying to advertise to white power, please don't attack me, I'm not a threat. And they still got lynched anyway. Now, rather than find a white person to snuggle up with, instead these swirlers find a white person and immediately begin sending out a torrent of anti-black rhetoric. It's not enough for you simply to decide you want to crawl under the sheets with a non-black person. You got to make sure that the black community is in your crosshairs and you put that on display for everyone to see. See, the swirler understands exactly what they've gotten themselves into. They understand that their interracial partner's value system, they understand what it is. And they're obsessing over showing them that they're totally down with it. They totally embrace it. This is why so many of them wind up boo-hooing about how their white boyfriend or his family or both keeps calling her nigger, and well, it's been going on for years and years. Now, you see, if a black man so much as says, you know, you need to, at the very least, put on some pants that don't show off your rear end so much. Don't tell me how to dress! I'll kill you, Negro! You know, they go off. Meanwhile, you got Mr. White over here. He can call you nigger all the day long. He can slap you around. He can even bring in his relatives, friends, and in-laws to get in on the fun. And you'll let that go on for years. And then when it's all over, you're not going off on him. You're not deciding that you're going to knuckle up on him. You're not calling the cops on him. You're not deciding to start a social movement against him. Instead, you're going on the freaking internet crying, boo-hooing, and looking for sympathy. See, the swirler refuses to take any responsibility for her actions. She gave the white supremacists full license to indulge their racism, to make them feel comfortable with it, because she got out there the loudest, strongest, and wrongest, deciding to wave the flag for it. She gave them entree to be racist, and then she turns around and acts surprised that that's exactly what they went and did. That's what she got with them for, and they knew it. She was just hoping that Mr. White would never turn his racism on her, which of course is being stuck on stupid. If there's anything that the white supremacist loves, it's a joke that takes a long time to pay off. The white supremacists love that joke. They love the joke that takes just days, if not years, to pay off. They love it because for them it's a delicious secret, just watching it build and build, and this person is going to be beyond crushed when the joke finally pays off, when they finally have the punchline delivered and realize they were the butt of the joke. It's going to crush them. Humiliation has always been a central part of white cultural humor. There's always been a strong component of humiliation that goes along with it. It's not enough for us merely to have a laugh. We got to have a laugh at your expense. And it can't be just getting in a little dig on you. It's got to be something personal. It's got to be something that lets you know that we can't stand you. It's always got to be something personal. But that's what the whole swirling nonsense is all about. Black people putting their insecurities and inadequacies on display. They use their white boyfriend as a security blanket. Well, as I've always taught you, under white supremacy, nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing. So all this garbage that you see these 4 types of bootlicks doing, these are not victimless crimes. This is part of how white supremacy helps to regularize the attacking of black people and make sure that they've always got a steady, ready phalanx of bootlicks. No matter what kind of attack that they carry out, there's always going to be some black people loud, strong, and wrong who are going to be saying it ain't racist or saying I'm with them and helping to give them cover. And that's the reason why we must call them out and why we cannot ever let up on the pressure. We must continue to call them out. We must continue to point them out. Look at what the hell they're doing with this nonstop barrage of fake documentaries. I mean, for God's sake, have you ever seen the white media having this kind of documentary fetish before about anything? On any subject? When have you seen the white media giving documentaries about any particular subject like this, and just every time you look up, oh, there's another documentary. Somebody's saying this. Oh, another documentary. Oh, look at this. I mean, how much do you have to see before you realize this is not grassroots, it's astroturf. This is not naturally occurring. This is a coordinated effort, and you can tell it's coordinated because of how consistent it is. Nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy, and that goes triple for the white media. The propaganda arm of white supremacy is the epitome of control when it comes to communication. If they're saying it, it's because it's something that they want to be out there. They want a particular message to be out there, and it's not because they think it's going to do you any good. The white media in particular has been hit really hard when it comes to the sexual harassment scandals. It's been white media types who have been taken on the chin. Everybody from Charlie Rose to Matt Lauer to Bill O'Reilly to you name it. Even media heads like Roger Ailes had to be brought in for some abuse. And it just keeps going on and on. So as far as they're concerned, they got to fight back hard as hell. The very propaganda mouthpiece of white supremacy has found itself losing credibility and losing support. After all, who needs a propaganda organ that nobody will listen to? So this is why you see them putting aside any pretense that they weren't racist, and why it is that they are boldly in your face crucifying any black man that they can on their platforms. You see all of them doing this. All of these white media outlets, big, small, and otherwise, all of them on the same page. What does that tell you? First of all, it tells you that they've all been practicing the exact same sexual predation. What it also tells you is that the white supremacist mentality goes across the board. All these little outlets that you thought somehow were not necessarily white supremacists, or at least they were white supremacists light, they're showing you, nah, we've been hardcore white supremacists. We were just a little less impolite than those other guys. You see them acting as a group in unison, and none of them is questioning this. Have you noticed that? Not even one of your good white pals is questioning any of this. They're not questioning the timing. They're not questioning the frequency. They're not questioning the narrow focus and saying, wait a minute, why is it the only documentaries that we're seeing are all about black men? So we don't have any documentaries about all these white men. Nobody's going to make a documentary about Roger Ailes' predation on women. Nobody's going to make a documentary about Don Hewitt, the patron saint of media. They're not going to talk about his 50 some odd years of sexual predation. Nobody's doing any documentaries about Les Moonves, Don Hewitt's golf partner. Oh, we ain't doing no documentaries about that. Are we going to see the case against Louis C.K.? Not anytime soon. So he can go ahead and make jokes at the expense of white children who are the victims of a mass shooting, and, well, no documentaries here. Hey, how about Kevin Spacey? I mean, between him and Jeffrey Epstein, Kevin Spacey was on Jeffrey Epstein's flight manifest. He was part of the whole Lolita Express. Surely he was a guest at Jeffrey Epstein's private island, Orgy Island as they called it. So we're going to have a documentary about Kevin Spacey, right? Nope. The white media is fighting for its survival. They can't deny the dirt that they've done, and they can't have anyone making the white media's corruption into part of the public's official view of the white media. That's why it's so damned important to keep a tally of the white media's smear campaign against us. We need to make sure that it's not just something that falls down the memory hole where people are like, well, I kind of vaguely remember that there was something about, well, I can't really remember. This is the reason why you see me constantly over and over again mentioning the names, making sure that we give context, reminding you of what they've done, why I always make it a point to run the litany over and over and over again, because I'm not going to let you forget. We cannot forget the white media's racist MO. You're seeing it right in front of you. We cannot forget the times when they launched these racial assaults, because that's how black people like to hit the freaking snooze button. And once again, for the half-wits out there, this ain't about R. Kelly. I don't care about him, and the white media doesn't care about him either, any more than they cared about Bill Cosby or O.J. Simpson. R. Kelly is being used as a proxy for all black men in the society. The black bedwenches, feminists, they've said it. Whenever they talk about this controversy, they don't mention R. Kelly at all. Have you noticed that? These black feminists, whenever they decide that we're going to talk about the surviving R. Kelly non-humanity, they don't talk about R. Kelly. Have you noticed that? All they do is just attack black men in general. That's all they do. They don't talk about whether or not the documentary is factually correct. They don't talk about any of the alleged rapacious behavior of R. Kelly. They don't talk about any of the incidents or when it happened. They don't ever talk about that. You would think that just for the sake of listing how vile and venal and corrupt and perverted R. Kelly's behavior has been, you would think that they would give you the play-by-play, but they're not. They're barely mentioning R. Kelly at all. They're mentioning him in vagaries. But when it comes to black men, they make sure to get that point across. You black men, you're the enemy. They just immediately jump from R. Kelly to black men in general. They're so sloppy with their white supremacist shilling that they can't even be subtle about it. They're too stupid to be careful. They just go right up the middle. The entire point of bringing up R. Kelly was just to use him as entree to demonize black men as a group, because we got to get the heat off the pale males. The feminists don't care about R. Kelly, and you can tell because most of their conversation ain't got a dang thing to do with them. They're not going to give you chapter and verse of all of his sexual assaults. They're not going to spell out his degrading behavior. They're not going to break down which assaults took place where and to whom. They can't, for a bunch of screaming harpies who are constantly saying, say the names, whatever. Yeah, whatever. They can't, notice how they're not saying any freaking names. You know, kind of like how you never hear them saying the names of Charlena Lyles, or Rakia Boyd, or Sandra Bland, or Ayanna Jones, See, they're not saying those names. They said them once or twice, but as soon as the white media says, "Okay, we're moving on. We've covered our behinds. Now nobody can say that we did not talk about it." As soon as the white media drops it, so do the black feminists, and you never hear it from them again. How many of them were talking about the murder of Jasmine Barnes? They weren't talking about it. And the reason why is because they don't care about black women and girls. Black feminists are not out there to protect black women. They are out there, as they see it, to grease the skids for getting your hands on a white man, and hopefully you can have some designer babies that don't look anything black. Well, it won't take but 3 or 4 generations, but we're on our way. We're on our way to getting rid of that ugly black gene. That's what the black feminists are all about. Oh, I have to be with a white man because these black men are so evil. They're so that's why I've got to be with a white woman because these black men are just so dangerous, you see. When the O.J. trial went down, people who were skeptical of the prosecution, they pointed out the numerous inconsistencies and holes in Marsha Clark's case. Those who supported the prosecution, they tried to do the same thing, but in the end they were usually reduced to saying, well, if O.J. didn't do it, then who did? A defendant doesn't have to prove his innocence, by the way, at least not unless you're black. Well, the point that I'm making is, any way you want to slice it, the black feminists are acting as the point women for white supremacy. The whole R. Kelly thing, that doesn't matter. It could have been anything or anyone. That's the reason why they had no problem going in on Chris Brown. That's the reason why Essence Magazine has decided that it's time to bring Touré's sorry behind in for some abuse. He thought that getting out there and pulling a Tiffany Haddish and throwing a black person under the bus was going to protect him. He thought it would preserve them. He thought it would ingratiate him and endear him to the eyes of white power. The white media would leave him alone. He thought that somehow he could rehabilitate himself. They just want to remind him, nah, nigger, we ain't forgot. Yeah, look how stupid this Touré guy was. He thought that he could throw a black person under the bus and that get the heat off of him. Let's go ahead and show him how wrong he is. See, they don't mind a joke that takes a long time to pay off. Touré was setting his dumb behind up and didn't even know it, setting himself up like a fool. The white media cannot allow themselves to be the first to racialize rape. They understand the history that goes along with that. They understand the game that has to be played. White supremacy has always understood the need to become more sophisticated, more complex, as a means to more readily cover their tracks. They've always understood the need to do that. So you shouldn't be surprised at their sophistication. That happens to be a central part of how white supremacy conceals itself. If you're not sophisticated, if you're not willing to look at the necessity to be complex in the face of an opposition, black people who are catching on to your schemes, some of us, then what happens is you get found out, rooted out, and put out very quickly. So white supremacy, of course, they're going to enlist black people to help them sell the lies. And they know that they can't put any white women out there. They need black people who are going to get out there and spew their lies for them. And then afterwards, the white media will jump up and say, hey, we didn't say that all black men are rapists. These black women over here, who we put up to it, they said it. We're just reporting what they said. But of course, it's not coverage at all. It's the white media taking the ball and running with it. It's a script. It's a narrative playing itself out. Hey, we got some lies we're going to say about black men. We got to be careful, though. We can't come out and say it first. So, hey, we got you black feminists over here. You need to earn your freaking pay. We'll put a couple of you on television. We know how you clowns are narcissistic as hell. You probably constantly watch yourselves on YouTube or something because nobody else will. So we'll go ahead and put you on AM Joy or some other little nigger show that nobody's going to watch. Or we'll have some little stupid guest column for you, give you a couple of pennies. You black feminists are always looking for a handout. And then afterwards, we're going to go ahead and come in with the really hard stuff. And we know you'll be cheering us on because what the hell else have you got going? The rape-happy black man is one of the oldest lies of white supremacy. It happens to be the oldest white media narrative. It's the oldest play in the handbook for them. I would love to say that they dusted it off so they could use it against R. Kelly, but the truth is they never let the black rapist narrative sit long enough to get any dust. That black that black rapist narrative, that thing stays shiny. In fact, it's worn out. It's got all sorts of rust and fingerprints, and it's all dented up because they use that damn thing 24/7. By the way, as long as we're talking about R. Kelly, as long as we're debating the obvious media distraction, what we're not doing is following the real story of the white men who have admitted to the rapes and sexual assaults that they've committed. As soon as I saw the pictures of Kevin Spacey at his arraignment, I'm sitting here going, well, they're going to need something really big to come out with, because that's the whole point. If you show a white man in handcuffs for something, then we need to really blitz the media. We're trying to counter that, not merely balance it. They want to counter it, going completely in the opposite direction. Forget about the white guy over here. It's these niggers over here you need to be looking at. Jeffrey Epstein literally had an entire black book full of the rich and powerful who he was zipping around the world with. Presidents, prime ministers, Hollywood elite. And yet the white media is not following up on any of that. A Wall Street bigwig is running his own pedophile ring, and the white media doesn't care. And as I said before, Kevin Spacey was one of the people who Jeffrey Epstein would pal around with on his private jet, the so-called Lolita Express. And even though Kevin Spacey is facing charges in Massachusetts, the white media hasn't brought up that little factoid. They're not trying to draw any connections between a white man and another white man, both accused of sexual assault. They're not bringing up any sort of connections. They're not connecting the dots. No playing 6 degrees of separation here, huh? That's what they're doing with Kevin Spacey. It's a matter of, this ain't media coverage, it's a media cover-up. Nobody is deciding that there needs to be any sort of mention of that. And they're not going to mention any of the other people in Jeffrey Epstein's black book, no matter what kind of trouble they get into. Come on, what about Alec Baldwin? The rumor's been out there about him for the longest time. And Bill Clinton, hell, that narrative writes itself. But the white media won't be writing it. And by the way, while we're on the subject of the white media trying to cover their behind against the flood of sexual degeneracy that they've been engaged in, have you noticed that the administrative arm of white supremacy, that is the white government, hasn't done, much less said much about it? In fact, they've said little and done less. You've got big-time white media outlet after white media outlet exposed for sexual assault. The guys who ran the damn places have been exposed. The biggest names in media, from Matt Lauer to Don Hewitt to Roger Ailes to Bill O'Reilly to whomever, exposed. And all of this going back decades. The guys who run the media, Les Moonves, Charlie Rose, whomever, all of these guys getting exposed. The former head of NPR, it just goes on and on and on and on. Going back decades. And the white media doesn't convene any congressional hearings. Heads of studios, network executives, and the government doesn't care. The FCC doesn't so much as say a peep. The government's not saying anything. No condemnations from the halls of white governmental power. No hearings being convened. Nothing. They're not saying, we need to bring some people in. People have been assaulted, rapes going on. We need to figure out how bad it is. So come on, we can have House Un-American Activities Committees in the 40s and 50s. We can have mafia hearings in the 70s. You can even have stuff like the church committee scandals. Oh, we can go ahead and do that because these things don't threaten white power. But what we're not going to be doing is doing anything that threatens the legitimacy of the propaganda arm of white supremacy. And this is very galling when you look at the right-wingers. You would think that after decades of the white right, the so-called conservatives complaining about the liberal media, now that the same conservatives have a perfect stick to crack the liberal media over the head with, you can just list the liberal, quote-unquote, sexual pedophiles and rapists in the white media off all day. You would think that that's what the white right would be doing, but they're not. This is a tailor-made opportunity to go after the liberal media. You would have thought the right-white would have been demanding that their Republican Congress, at the very least, convene a series of public hearings just so that we can go ahead and have some PR show trials. Let's bring them in and force them to own up to all the dirt. I mean, the Republicans controlled Congress for the last year, and not one hearing about it, nothing at all. If ever there was an event that was tailor-made to undercut the liberal media, this was it. But not only did the white right not take advantage of it, they ran away from it. But that shouldn't surprise you. As I documented for you, no less than Roger Ailes spent most of his life working to build the so-called liberal media. Roger Ailes was out there helping the liberal media for the longest time before he decided to strike out on his own. That whole right-wing thing, that was just him trying to come up with his own brand, something that would differentiate him from his peers, something that would help him. He was trying to cut out a niche for himself. That had nothing to do with ideology and everything to do with business and marketing. And many of the liberal reporters in that liberal press, they consider Roger Ailes to be a good friend, as Joe McInnes, who covered the 1968 election of Nixon and Roger Ailes' part in it, said. He didn't let things like personal politics get in the way of his friendship with Roger Ailes. Now, sure, the left wing and right wing are in competition with one another, but just not for the reasons that they tell you. The spitball fights that you see these guys having on the Sunday morning news shows, they're meaningless. That's just entertainment that they're putting on for you. The reason that these guys never seem to hold any grudges about that kind of thing is because they know that it's all theater. They know that. You don't. You take it seriously. They don't. They know better than that. The purpose of the white government is to maintain and perpetuate white supremacy. Everything else is just window dressing. The non-issues and controversies that you see these so-called politicians pretending to have on TV, they're never about anything that threatens white supremacy. Even the whole thing with Trump's border wall. The wall means nothing. Most of the illegal aliens get in by overstaying their visa. They come in legally and then just refuse to leave. If you actually wanted to do something about the illegal aliens, then what you would do is you would go after the white businesses who hired them. Whether it's landscapers, restaurants, construction firms, even Walmart got caught getting in on the act. You go after the white people who have been using these illegal aliens as low-cost labor, you could start to cut those magnets off real fast, but nobody talks about that. Even the right wing doesn't. Pat Buchanan talked about that. He found that when he was trying to run for president, his financial support among right-wing businessmen immediately ended when he started talking about we're going to go after these businessmen and landlords who give jobs and who give housing to these illegal aliens. And these white businessmen were telling Pat Buchanan, you're talking about putting us in jail. So you see, even the conversation, such as it is, about the border wall, it doesn't have anything to do with anything substantive. It doesn't threaten white supremacy. Oh, it's going to be a feel-good moment for those on the white right. They're going to feel good that they made a political statement, but it won't change anything because it's not supposed to. White power understands that they need the white media. White supremacy requires a means to deceive the masses and to communicate within itself. That's the purpose that the white media serves. So neither the white right nor the white left will ever seriously try to destroy one another. White supremacy believes in controlling both sides of the argument, as Neely Fuller said. So white supremacy absolutely requires a right wing who viciously pushes their agenda overtly, and to mollify the predictable dissent that's going to come as a result, they also set up a pretend opposition party who talks like they're not racist but acts racist as hell. In the 19th century, the Democrats were the ones who were out there saying that they were the party of the white man's rights. And the Republicans, for a hot minute, were talking as if they were egalitarians and believed in equality. See, they just switched it up about between the 1940s, between FDR and LBJ is when a transition took place. From the 1930s, and it was complete by the mid-1960s. A transition took place, and most people didn't even understand that it was simply like a football team or a basketball team changing whatever end zone that they're going to be playing for. The game is still the same. They switched positions, and you thought that this was some sort of revolution when it was nothing. Same old game. Now, in the past, they were able to use their media monopoly in order to handpick a Negro and say, hey, this is black people's leader. This is your leader, Negroes. Now, in time, this game wore thin, so the white media handpicked a Negro, usually a preacher, and said, hey, this is a black spokesman. This is your spokesman. But thanks to the new voices of black media, this game, too, has run out, so white supremacy is not entirely sure what to do. because black people had fallen for the okey doke for so long, controlled opposition from within the black community. We fell for this scam so long, white supremacy never actually had to consider what they would do if black people ever smartened up. So what they're doing is they're pushing their hand-picked flunkies who they planted in our community to lead us around by the nose. These Judas goats who make it their point that they're going to lead black people to the slaughter. Who the hell said that D. Ray McKeeson was a black leader? We sure as hell didn't. But white liberals, in direct opposition to what we've said, they keep pushing and presenting him as being some sort of leader. They try to give him as many platforms as possible because this is seen as giving him legitimacy and prestige. He must be a black leader, otherwise, why would he be so high profile? We're going to make him prominent. Malcolm talked about that. They handpick some Negro, make him prominent, and talk about him, and they tell you that this is supposed to be a leader. That's the power that the white media has. They can invent a reality out of whole cloth. It's completely false reality, but you're going to have to be spending real time and real effort fighting a complete figment of the white media's imagination. D. Ray McKeeson, the black leader, to whatever extent he's supposed to be, that's a figment of white power's imagination. But as black people, we have real resources being put behind the guy, real media time, real effort to prop him up. So of a necessity, we got to spend real time on it to make sure that we knock down this straw man. This stalking horse cannot be allowed to stand. Oh, you got a whole bunch of these white media pimps pushing these Negroes at us, a bunch of leaders who don't even have a following. And it shouldn't surprise you that you got all of these white liberals who are the main ones pushing these clowns, because left-wing white supremacy is every bit as mendacious and sick as right-wing white supremacy. They've spent decades playing off of one another, whipsawing us back and forth as it suited white supremacy's interests. We have got to separate ourselves from these four types of bootlicks, or at the very least, we got to separate them from us. I got a message for all of you bootlicks out there. The four types that we just broke down. Clearly, you clowns don't want to be black, and that's fine by me. Nobody wants you to be on our team. We've got too many folks on the roster as is, and these bootlicks, they're not going to be allowed to hang around. If your sexual kink means more to you than being black, fine. If identifying with white women means more to you than being black, fine. If your fascination with being accepted by everyone except black people means more to you than being black, fine. Whatever your dysfunction or hang-up or psychological screw-up is, I don't want you to let go of it. I want you to embrace it. You might as well stop faking, because you're not fooling anyone at this point. Go ahead and just declare that you're not black and let that be the end of it, because that's what you want to do anyway. All you four types of bootlicks, that's what you guys are about. What you want to do is you want to declare that you're not black, but you know how ridiculous that would sound, so instead you're attacking everyone who is black. You're declaring your non-blackness in everything but word. Well, you're not fooling anybody. We don't live in a bubble. You can't take your make-believe color blindness into a world that's dominated by white supremacy and think that it's going to work. Tiger Woods thought that he could be a community of one, and I think we all know how that one turned out. So for all of you four types of bootlicks and all the other variations of varieties that exist, just understand, when you guys, not if, but when your would-be white hosts finally get tired of looking at you, because they always do, and it's time to kick you out the door, because they always will. White supremacy has no permanent place for its bootlicks. They have no permanent plans for you. Do not think that you're going to be finding a way to slither and slime your way back over here. We're not trying to have a big tent. We're not trying to figure out how to attract as many people as possible. It's the quality of people that we're interested in, not the quantity. You haven't fooled anybody. Your efforts to escape being blackness, well, congratulations. In a sense, you have. You have escaped being blackness, because you're not going to be allowed to ever come back. It ain't going to happen. You're not going to be allowed to. You have chosen your side. You have chosen the side of white supremacy, so the black community's got nothing for you. And no matter how much white supremacy decides to kick you around and punch you around and slap you around, your pathetic pleas for sympathy from the black community are not going to wash. It's way past time that those who have thrown the black community under the bus be made to live with the mistake of their demented decisions.